If you're about to take a trip, it's critical that you have a map that will show you how to get to your destination so that you won't get lost. Likewise, we need a roadmap to follow to reach your career goal.
So when you're talking to these so-called job search experts, usually the first thing that they'll do is they'll say, okay, you're looking for a job, let's start writing a resume. And that is absolutely, completely wrong. I mean, if you're doing a marketing campaign of a product, that would be the same thing as saying, okay, we're going to develop a marketing campaign for this product. Let's start making a TV commercial right now. I mean, no. I mean, the first thing you have to do is you have to develop your plan. You have to identify, well, who is it that's, who are we trying to promote this product to? And you want to shape everything towards that target market. Likewise, of course, in your job search, we need to start by developing your plan too.
The first thing you need to do before embarking on a trip is to identify your destination so you can chart a course towards it. For your job search, we have to start by identifying your destination, which is what we will call your target market.
You can identify those parameters or that criteria of a target market basically with four things. One thing that you're going to be looking at is, what is the position type, or what type of role do I want to go after? The second thing will be the industries that will be of interest to you. The third thing would be the location of the position. Do you want to do a localized search? Are you wanting to move to another city or another state? Or do you want to look at like a region? Maybe you want to say, hey, I want to look at like the southeastern region from Virginia through Florida. But you have to identify location. And then lastly, what you have to do is identify the size of the organization. Whether you prefer working with a smaller organization, whether you prefer larger firms, medium, does not really matter. But for each one of your target markets, you're going to basically have a listing of those, or I should say the criteria of those four areas, and that will comprise the target market.
I've supplied 2 Jayobi GIFs on this page that will help you develop your strategic plan. Now, the very first one is a form that I've created for you, and I would recommend that you print this out, because what we're going to do is we're going to go through and fill out each one of these criteria, the very first one being the type of position you want, second being the industries that are of interest to you, third being location, and last being the size of the firm for each one of your target markets. Now, the second gift is actually what is called an SIC code list. Now, an SIC, what that stands for is Standard Industrial Classification Code. And it's just a universal coding system of different industry types. In fact, this is a very nice list for you to go through, because you may not know what all industries are of interest to you, that you're wanting to pursue. So as you're scrolling through it, you might actually find things that are really of interest to you. For example, let's say I'm interested in going after pharmaceutical type firms. And you'll notice there's a code that corresponds to that, which is 2834. And maybe as I'm scrolling down a little bit further, I identify, well, gee, other things that I like are, let's just look here, let's say surgical and medical instruments, which the SIC code for that is 3841. But you'll be using this sheet and these SIC codes to identify the specific companies in that plan. Here's an example of how you will fill out your form. Now, the very first step, if you remember, is to identify the position objective. Now, let's say in my example, I want to become a salesperson, so I'll call it a sales representative. The second thing is then to identify the types of industries that are of interest to me. And if you remember when I was scrolling through that SIC code list, some of the things that were of interest to me were the pharmaceutical companies, and the SIC code for that was 2834. And I was also interested in medical equipment firms, so that SIC code is 3841. The next thing after that you have to do is identify where you want the position to be. And let's say I want to move to San Diego, California. And then the last thing is that you have to identify the size preference of the organization, or how big the firm is. And let's say that I only want to pursue firms that are medium and large in size, or have sales of at least $25 million. Well, what I've done very, very easily and clearly is to find exactly the position that I want, sales representative, and the demographics of my target market, or markets, pharmaceutical and medical equipment companies in San Diego that have at least sales of $25 million or more.
What I'd like you to do is actually go through, and like I said, I'm giving you those tasks to do, but I want you to go through and actually, formulate for yourself what your target markets will be for our next session. And then the next session, what we're going to be doing is starting to work on cover letters and resumes and how to write effective documents that will actually get you in the door, get you noticed. And of course, a part of that is going to be tailoring them or shaping them towards these markets that we're defining here. You can break up people into two different categories. There's the dreamer people and there's the doer people. And a dreamer basically hopes that something nice happens to them. It's like, oh, in my job search, I hope I hope I can find a good position in Career Builder that's coming to me. Because you click on Career Builder or any of those websites, and you're hoping that there's this perfect job out there that you're going to click submit, and you're going to get this interview or an offer. And then there's doers. Then there's people who actually go out and they take charge of their own careers and they move themselves forward. And and a kind of an illustration that I use, what is the difference between a dreamer and a doer? Let's say a person's got a garden. And they've got this garden, and let's say to the dreamer looks over and he looks at his garden, and he sees that there's some weeds in his garden, and he says, "Oh my gosh, there's some weeds in my garden." So he puts his head back, he closes his eyes. He's like, "I'm going to think positive thoughts here. I'm going to hope that these weeds go away. There are no weeds in my garden. There are no weeds in my garden. There are no weeds in my garden." And then he opens his eyes or her eyes, and he looks down at the garden, and the weeds have overtaken the garden. Now, a doer will look down at the garden and say, "Hey, I've got some weeds in my garden. I'm going to start pulling them out." And then the next thing you know, that garden begins to blossom and bloom. So you want to be, with regard to your job search, because mind you, this is your life. I'm standing here talking, but if you actually want to take charge of your job search, you're going to have to become a doer, not just a dreamer.